Hey everybody, it's time for another good word from God's Word. Today, we are looking at Second Kings chapter 18, which is, we've been reading the Bible chapter by chapter, and we are about two-thirds of the way through Kings. And just so you know, looking ahead, next week we're going to start Chronicles, which kind of repeats what we just saw in First and Second Kings, but it's just a different telling of the stories. But here in Second Kings in chapter 18, it is still focusing on the kings of Judah, and we get to the best king outside of David and Solomon, and we get to a man named Hezekiah. The Bible actually says in chapter 18 that Hezekiah, there was no greater king before or after him. But what made him great? Well, what made him great was that when he took over the throne, he destroyed all of the other places that they worshiped the Lord, because the only place they were supposed to worship was Jerusalem, was in Jerusalem at the temple, but they had started worshiping in all these other places, and including they started to worship the snake pole thing that Moses had created when they were in the desert and being attacked by snakes before they took the promised land. If you don't know what I'm talking about there, be sure to check it out in Numbers. I'm not sure exactly what chapter, but that's where it is. It's a pretty crazy thing, but they still had this thing and they were even worshiping that. And so Hezekiah, he brought the entire kingdom of Judah, the southern kingdom, he brought them all back to the Lord, to following God and following the rules and laws. And God blessed him for it, so much though that he actually kicked out the Philistines. But what's happening in the region at the time is that the Assyrians, the Assyrians were becoming a world power at the time. Egypt was losing its power. The Philistines were losing its power. Assyria was coming through and spreading out and becoming one of the largest empires the world had ever known at the time. And because Israel, the northern kingdom, had not followed God, had really not followed God since its beginning, this was its reckoning. And so Assyria came in and took it out, and it took all of the cities of Samaria. And so now Judah is just this one small little country in the middle of the Middle East, and they're all alone. And they think that they can pay to get Egypt in there, and Assyria knows this. And so Sennacherib, which is the emperor of Assyria, comes in and he sieges all of the fortified cities of Judah. And if you don't really know what a siege is, this is not like what we saw in Lord of the Rings, where they were, all the armies gather up around the giant tower, the giant walls, and they bring up these besieging towers. And some of them did do those type of things, but mostly what it was camping. They would go around these walled cities and they would block all the roads coming in and coming out of these cities. And they were basically, their plan was just to starve them to death. And so it would take months, sometimes even years, to take this entire city down. But that was the way to do it. That was what they did. And as once everyone was weak, they would either surrender or there would be a break in the wall and they would go in and attack them. And we know that this is happening because there's at one point where Sennacherib sends a message into them, and he says to them in verse 27, this is the commander, the Assyrian commander, the general of the Assyrian army. He says, was it only to your master, in verse 27, was it only to your master and you that my master sent me to say these things, and not the people sitting in the wall, who, like you, will have to eat their own excrement and drink their own urine? Ugh. But if you don't have any food, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? And so this is like one of the darkest days in all of Judah's history, certainly one of the darkest days in all of Israel's history. This is the promised land. This is the land that God had promised them. And here they are staring down one of the major world powers that is literally on the brink of destruction. And in chapter 18, that's what we find. We find the final threat of, we are going to kill you. We are going to kill everyone. You should just go ahead and surrender now, or it's all going to be over. And Hezekiah is upset by it. I looked ahead a little bit at chapter 19. I encourage you to do the same. Pastor Tommy will talk about it tomorrow. But the three leaders who heard this story, they tear their robes, which is a sign of great distress in that time. And Hezekiah does the same. And they do what we should all do in our darkest times, is that they call out to God and it's, God, we need you. God, is this it? Is this over? They thought that like all their lives were done for. And so I don't want to give it away, but ultimately I don't want to give away what happens in chapter 19. You can go read that for yourself. But what I want to point out in this is that sometimes I know this is we just got out of Thanksgiving, and it's a great time to celebrate family, and it's a great time to celebrate being together, especially those of us who have the pandemic is waning down and you're finally able to see family again, and that's amazing. But other people are not, and other people, this maybe for you, this may be one of the darkest, hardest times of your life. But do not give up on your faith. Don't give up on God, because God has not given up on you. You still have a story to tell. You still have a part to play. That's what was going on with Hezekiah and his three generals and all of Judah, and that is what's going on with you. You still have a place to go. God he loves you. He has a plan for you. He has a purpose for your life, and he wants you to do something. He wants you to serve as part of his plan. And so have hope, continue pushing. That is one of the great things as we celebrate Christmas and we look forward. Advent starts tomorrow. And Advent is a joyous celebration, but also a waiting for the hope of the world in Jesus. That's what Advent is all about, is looking for what is coming, and to prepare our hearts and our minds for what is coming. And that is Jesus. And Jesus is coming back again one day. And when all this is over, we will be with him in heaven. And I pray that, and I hope that that brings hope and joy to you in this moment, that it's all in God's hands, who loves you. And if you love him, and if you follow him, he will take care of you. That doesn't mean that everything is going to be all great and rosy and perfect. It's not. Jesus actually told us that it's not. He said your life will have many trials and troubles. But I do know that God works together for the good of those who love him and trust him. And I hope that is for you. And take some faith in that you will get through this. God will see you through. Just trust him. So that's today's good word from God's word. Hope you're doing great. We're finishing up our What If series tomorrow. It's going to be an amazing time as we celebrate all the money that is raised in the pledges for our Compassion in Action initiative. We have raised so much money. I think it's over $100,000 now just in cash, and that's not counting pledgings and our matching gift, which is just amazing for us to serve Sarasota. And so we encourage you to jump in and be a part with us as we continue to serve and do what we can. We will see you next time. Pastor Tommy will be here tomorrow, and hope you're having a great day. Bye-bye.